Hello everyone, Jason from Truth Behind the Magic here. I apologize first and foremost, we haven't been uploading all that much the past couple weeks. Things have kind of gotten a little bit busy for both of us. In fact, Blaze is actually in Europe right now. National Lampoon's European Vacation, I suppose, but I will be flying solo for this one. This is an idea I've been thinking about doing a video for a while now. It's a topic that you don't see much about on the internet. Now, if you're in like the Facebook group, I mean, it's a relevant topic, not even just if you're in the group, but just kind of to digress from what I was gonna say, but it's an extremely important topic, and that's why I wanted to make this video, because if you're in the Facebook group, you see this topic come up pretty much on a daily basis these days, and there's just not that much out there about it. There are YouTube videos, I've seen them personally back before my first program. In subsequent years I've seen multiple videos, but typically the videos are people giving their experience, and they talk about why they self-termed. That's really the focus, is why, not the what, when, how. Well, I guess how, kind of, but yeah, I think, and that has a place, that's important, but I think people should really focus more, or at least it needs to be put out, what happens, how does this go down, what are the ramifications of this. I just haven't seen much of that on YouTube. I'm sure people have gone over that, but that's really the purpose here, is not to say why. And this is something I've experienced firsthand, so this isn't like secondhand knowledge, just whispers that I've heard out there. Now, if you're on the program for a long time, you will pick up a lot of knowledge about things, including this topic, that you yourself probably won't experience. But yeah, I know I can say without a doubt this is coming from firsthand experience, and really my goal here is just to educate people on what actually happens if you're in the situation where you have to self-term. So now that I'm a couple minutes into the video, I'll explain what self-terming is if you don't know. Probably should have started with that. That is just Disney's fancy way. Well, they use the term getting terminated. That's their thing. I don't know. I guess getting fired sounds too harsh for them. I don't see how that's any better, though. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger might just appear from backstage and you are terminated, like that. That may happen to you on the job, but it's just kind of their fancy way of saying getting fired. And when it comes to self-terming, I think it makes even more sense, because that is something that's really program specific. Like, I don't think anyone who just leaves a regular Disney role is like a full-time or part-timer says, I self-termed. I've never heard that, but if someone gets fired, they do say they were terminated. But I think it makes more sense in this case, because you're not quitting. You are just terminating from the program. It's not like you're just straight up quitting, at least in my mind, and we'll get into that later, but there's a lot more that goes into this than just, I'm done. But yeah, that's pretty much, and I'm kind of just freewheeling this video. I have like a very few basic bullet points. Usually I do a little more research, but I kind of just wanted to free flow this, so hopefully it'll be somewhat cohesive. But I guess to get started, I'll just talk about kind of some of the reasons why people self-term. And, you know, if you're watching this video, I'm sure there are people out there that are debating whether or not to do it. Maybe they just want to know more about it before they go into the program. Like, I aim to help everyone with this, just so you kind of know what's going on. And I think there's a few big reasons why people self-term. Family emergencies, which that comes into play for my reason for when I did it on my second program, which I'll go into that after this. Major life events like a wedding, death in the family, that sort of thing. A lot of times your only option is to self-term, because Disney doesn't really give a college program the option to take days off in situations like that, which I'll get into that more specifically later as well. Depression is another big one. I've personally known people who self-turned for that reason. And I think that is a very valid reason. The fourth one I would say, which I do not consider as valid, and I will, like I said, I will dig deeper into this as well, but people who simply just don't like their job placement. They're not depressed necessarily. They're not suffering from legitimate anxiety or anything like that. They just don't like their job. A lot of entitled people feel that way about the program. Like, you're getting this great chance to do something that not a lot of people get to do, but I just don't want to work quick service, so I'm gonna leave. Like, I've seen that many a time, so it certainly does happen. And I think there are times where it's fair to leave because you don't like your job placement, but for this specific category, the fourth category of like why most people self-term, I'm kind of considering it the people who are kind of just they are quitters. Those people are. The other categories, you're not quitting. It's necessary in those cases, but these people are kind of just like, I'm screw you guys, I'm going home, like that kind of thing, you know. Eric Cartman has appeared. But yeah, I'll just kind of, looking at my 8 bullet points here, very basic again, thinking about where I want to go with this. Yeah, so family emergencies, major life events, as I said, if you are a college programmer, you're not really given the option to take time off to go do that. You pretty much have to take the standard route of getting days off, applying for them internally through the hub, and hoping you're approved the days off, or giving away shifts, which it is a lot easier than previous times to give away your shifts now. You don't have to have leader approval. That used to be a big thing. You would have to go to a leader and have them push it through every time, which that's what I have done for most of my giving away a shift experience. But now you can just do it straight through the hub as long as you have the information of the person you are giving the shift to, or vice versa. But essentially, I think the trade-off there, because that sounds bad, which, I mean, it's not great, but the trade-off, which is something I wanted to get into as well, is you're probably wondering, if I do leave the program, do I have to pay the duration of my rent, which could be, 8 months left or whatever, even if I'm not living there? And this is one of the areas where I will give Disney full credit. They're actually being very gracious, them along with American Campus Communities, who run housing, in the fact that if you do have to leave the program, you do not have to pay, you don't have to pay out the rest of your rent. All you have to do is pay the remainder for the week that you are leaving, which if you leave on certain days, I think it's Saturday, I don't know officially what the day is anymore, you don't have to pay anything. I think I had to pay one day, or one or two, it was like 25 or $50, something like that. But yeah, that's definitely a big thing. Like I said, I think that kind of is that's the trade-off of not really having the ability to take, I don't know, grievance leave or whatever you want to call it, is they say, even though we don't allow you to do this, we at least will let you leave in peace. You won't have to send us a send us a check every month for the next 6 months. But, yeah, so definitely, if that's something you were wondering about, just keep that in mind. You won't have to pay thousands of dollars after you leave. Which that kind of ties into another topic I wanted to talk about here. And are the ramifications of this the same as someone who legitimately gets terminated from the company non-willingly? And the short answer to that is no. There are a few similarities, but for the vast majority of the statement, it's no. It is quite a bit different than most cases of getting terminated. There are a few different ways you can get terminated. I would kind of boil those down into 3 categories. One would be you get too many attendance reprimands. That's like the lowest level of the totem pole. And I do believe you can come back after that if it's 6 months or a year later, depending. And that's the most similar to self-terming. It's still definitely worse because it will be on your record and it will definitely say, you know, you got fired because you didn't show up to work. The other would be a safety-related termination, and this is not nearly as common, I wouldn't think, as attendance-related. Well, no, actually, it's probably about on par, especially depending on the role, because some roles, it would be extremely hard to get terminated for safety reasons. Other roles, it's 10 times easier. But for that, if you get 2 safety reprimands, typically you will get recast into another role. Now, if there's no availability or anything, you will get terminated. And if something safety related happens again, you will get terminated in that case as well, I would have to imagine. Now, there are cases where it's such an egregious safety hazard that you have created on the job, an egregious non-following of the rules, you do something so bad that they will essentially terminate you on the spot. I saw that happen to a couple people in attractions while I was working attractions. I also saw a couple people who had to get recast because they got 2 safety reprimands. Where I worked, it was very easy to get safety reprimands. I got out of there without having any, but it was quite something. And the third major category, I would say, is criminal-related termination, or just kind of generally going against company policy, and that's the worst, I would say. Because, yeah, you're definitely getting put on a never rehire list, like the just straight up no rehire, not restricted rehire, not the 6 months or a year, you're just gone. And potentially banned for life as well, which I have heard of that happening multiple times for some pretty serious reasons. Yeah, so it's definitely a lot different, because with a self-term, like I said, it's the most like if you were to get fired for an attendance reprimand, I think it's 4 in a year, is what gets you terminated. You have the 6-month window before you can come back to the company, and that's the first thing people are going to want to know is, can I come back after this? Yes, you can. If you want to do another program, you can't apply again for another 6 months, but you can come back. I came back. I terminated off my second program in April of 2022. I self-termed. I came back in summer of 2023 for an alumni program, got into that no problem, so you definitely can come back. Now, as far as regular employment, like if you wanted to come back as a full-timer, part-timer, I'm not 100% sure if it has the 6-month delay before you can come back, but I believe it does. I don't see why it wouldn't have that. It just makes sense. Plus, if you're self-terming, you're probably not going to come back within 6 months as a full-timer anyway, so I would just keep that in mind. 6 months is pretty much the barometer of when you're literally allowed by company policy to come back. If you try before that, you will just straight up get no longer in consideration as soon as you apply. Yeah, and I think that, yeah, it's pretty much it for the differences between terming and self-terming. Like I said, the big takeaway from that is that you can come back. You're not put on the no hire list. And I don't believe it stays on your permanent record because, so in my case, I was there for 3 months before I self-termed. That's literally a program. Like, there are 3-month college programs, the alumni program. That's longer than a lot of the international people are there for their entire program. So that's why I look at it as, like I said, you're not just quitting. I had been there for 3 months. I look at it as essentially completing another program, even if I didn't stay there for the 5 months or whatever that program length was. You have completed another program, or your first program in most cases. So definitely still hold your head high after that, and know that you most likely can come back after that, unless you've actually been terminated as stated. Yeah, so I think I'll go ahead and kind of tell my story just to kind of give an example of reasons for leaving, even though I've given kind of an overall example of those, like my specific situation and what actually happens when you self-term. What is the process? That's another thing that you never really see anyone talk about, anyone post about on the internet. I'm sure people have, but you don't hear about it much, and I want people to know what is the actual, what is the process that happens if you do this. Sorry, I'm saying a lot in this one. I guess that's pretty much every video these days, but yeah, so for me, it was a buildup of multiple things. So to start off, and this was not a major factor, but this program, I was working Toy Story Mania. It was the program I was on attractions. Post-COVID, and this was right after. I mean, it technically wasn't the first program they did after COVID, but it was the second to come back. It was kind of in shambles for a while. Like, just being honest, it took a while for the program to fully come back. I don't think it'll ever completely go back to what it was with some of the international participants and that kind of thing. I think they've scaled down on that. But it was a lot different than pre-COVID. I was working 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts, 1 or 2 days a week. And like I said, that wasn't like the big thing. And that would kind of fall into that category of, well, less in the category of just the people who say, I don't like the job, so I'm going to leave. If you're working 6 days a week, 70 hours a week or whatever, that's a pretty fair argument to say I don't want to do this for 7 months or whatever. But that wasn't the reason that I left. There were a couple other big things that happened. So that had kind of all been leading up. I basically said, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to complete this. But obviously, I had already done a 7-month program. I was pretty much just going to Universal 1 day a week. I wasn't even really going to Disney that much because we weren't allowed in the parks. We were pretty much blocked out of everywhere post-COVID. Epcot was pretty much the only place you could go. So I was kind of at the point where I was debating, like I said, I've already been here for 7 months before this. I don't really need to go to Universal 1 day a week that much, but I wanted to be down there. The job I preferred much to quick service. I definitely found it more appealing than that. There was there was just more of a guest service aspect to it, which quick service it's obviously guest facing. You deal with guests a lot, but you don't really get much interaction because it's so fast paced. But this, like, if you were outside the building, you got more, you could kind of have more freedom on certain roles, that kind of thing. But yeah, so one day I got up for work, I rolled my window down. When I went to roll it back up, it just would not go, and then the window ultimately fell down into the actual window and would not come back up. I went to a place to go get it fixed to see if they could figure out what it was. They said they could fix it, but they would have to get the part there, that kind of thing. I was like, okay, I'll just deal with it for now, put something over the window, see if I can fix it myself, which is ultimately what I did when I got back home. But at the same time, like I said, all that was building up with the 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts, 1 or 2 days a week. So I kind of just said, I don't really want my vehicle to be down here without a window. I mean, Flamingo is not exactly the safest place anymore. I'll be quite honest with you. It's not horrible. Disney housing has never been horrible by crime statistics wise. But there's some things that have happened that I never saw post or pre-COVID. That's kind of a digression, but I said, I don't really want to get my car stolen. It's not worth that to me. But that, once again, that was not the ultimate straw that broke the camel's back, as they say. I was still kind of debating what I should do, and I had texted my mother about it. And I got a text from either my dad or my brother a little while later, and they said she had gone to stay at a relative's house, and it was a new house. We didn't really know anything about it. And she had fallen down the stairs, broken most of her ribs, an arm, wrist, broke her neck in 3 places. Like, it was an injury that I'm sure had, at best, a 50% survival rate, and a much less than that rate of, not being paralyzed, not having even more life-altering situations to that. So when I heard that, I said, I'm not staying here. And that was just one thing on top of the other. Yeah, so that was the final thing where I said, I'm going home now. I will find out what I can about self-terming, which was very little, like I said. And that's a reason I'm making this, because I've been through it, and it was not that easy to go through without knowing anything. I mean, it's not that hard of a process, but without knowing pretty much anything was kind of sketchy. Yeah, so pretty much I had multiple of the reasons for self-terming in my event. Major life event happening, family emergency, car trouble. That's not on the list, but still it could go in under major life event slightly. Yeah, so at that point, I was trying to find out what to do, and I will tell you, straight up, getting up to go to work one day, and less than 24 hours later, being back home 10 hours away, when you thought you were just going to be going to work that night, is a very strange experience. And in my case, even more strange, because my journey back home was quite weird. And maybe I will get into that some as well, but I've kind of digressed at this point. So yeah, step 1, like I said, information gathering, found next to nothing, maybe like 1 or 2 things that at least gave me an inkling of what to do. The first thing you'll want to do is pack everything you have. At least get it packed in your room, potentially even getting it all in your car or luggage to get onto a plane, whatever you're doing. Do that first. The second step would be take your costumes back, and that's a big thing. In fact, after I got back home, leaders were asking me, telling me to make sure I took my costumes back and everything. I'm just like, I've done this before. I really don't need to know that. But anyway, yeah, took the costumes back to Hollywood Studios Costuming, went back. So there's 2 places you can go to kind of, I guess, officially get this done, so to speak. The community service desk is going to be your prime location, because that's open most of the time. It was actually so late in the day that I had to go to the community service window, which that is also in the community center at Flamingo. It literally is a window. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. There's like this room with like TVs and couches and stuff, and then there's just a hole in the wall with people behind it. I went up to them, basically asked them what I needed to do, and yet they just straight up said, get everything packed in your vehicle or whatever else, be ready to go. come back here, we'll take your blue ID, self-admission pass. I'm really not even sure why they take the self-admission pass. That's supposed to get deactivated anyway, but that's another story. Yeah, they take your parking pass if you're parking there. And that's pretty much it. You give them those 3 things, you make sure you're packed up, and then you leave. Like, it's... Considering how convoluted it is to get into the program, it's pretty crazy how easy it is to just leave. I guess the final step of that would be to contact a leader or proprietor or someone at your location. Just a leader is fine. And tell them the situation, that you won't be coming back. I don't know that you necessarily have to do that, but I think it's a good thing to do. Just because, especially if you want to come back, I think it looks better that you at least let someone know what was going on. And I think it also is necessary because it helps them get you out of the system faster. They're not just giving you 2 points every day or whatever for no call, no shows until you get termed on company policy. Which that's another thing. The points you get for self-terming, like the day after, those get removed from your account. At least in my situation they did, but I think, like I said, that's because I told them what was going on. They were able to go into the system and just tell it this was the day he left, and I think they took off like 4 points or something. It would have been 3 or 4, because there was one day I did call out when I wasn't sure if I'd be able to get it fixed or not, and then the next day, yeah, that would have been another 2 points every day after that. But when I checked my, I forget what they even call it on the hub now, your report card or whatever, that shows your points, I didn't have any from that program. I only had reprimands. In fact, I've only had reprimands since a few months into my first reprimands. Wow. I'm completely backwards. They've just given me reprimands left and right. Just throw them on the account. I've only been getting commends on my record for like the last pretty much a year that I've worked for the company. Commends from other cast members, leaders, coordinators, that kind of thing. Which you might think at the time, oh, this woohoo, what is this? It doesn't even really matter, but they do go on your record, and those look very good. We may do a video, me and Blaze, about reprimands, commends, that kind of thing. But yeah, like I said earlier, another big takeaway is that you can come back. And if you do come back, your record card is not just going to be demolished because of the whole process. And I guess that's kind of the last thing on the literal process of how does this go down. And just to kind of recap, get packed, take your costumes back, or vice versa. That part doesn't really matter, but make sure you get all the costume. Make sure you are ready to go. Because once they take your Flamingo key card, parking pass, all that, you can't even get back in your room. You need to be able to leave at that point. I'm just glad I didn't get towed within the 5 minutes walking to the community center to tell them I was going. But yeah, you give them all that, and then you leave. That's pretty much it. It's funny because I had applied for a couple extensions right before this all happened, because like I said, I was not going to leave even if the situation wasn't the best. I was committed to it. And I actually got the emails after getting back home that I had not been accepted for those. I'm like, I wonder if this was because of the terming process or because I just legitimately did not get it. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for the literal process. Oh, and I forgot, email your leaders. If you can, you'll still have hub access for a little while until they get it all sorted out. So if you don't know their email, just get on the hub and find it and email them from just a personal email. And I guess the final topic is just kind of, my personal thoughts and encouragement if you are in a situation where this may be something that you need to do, or at least considering. And like I said at the beginning, I know depression, homesickness is a very big thing on the college program. For a lot of people, this is their first time away from home. Even if they've been living in a college dorm, this is like your first time without any assistance. You don't have the dining hall. You know, you don't have financial aid. Like, you have the bus system, but that's about it. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take charge. Make sure you have your costumes, get to work on time, that kind of thing. Prepare your own food. And like I said, for a lot of people, this is their first time doing that. And it can be a big step. For me personally, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say I was antisocial when I started my first program. Or at least at the very end stages of not being antisocial anymore. Because college was like the first step for me. High school was a horrible time, but college was like the first real step towards kind of coming out of my shell. But then working for Disney completely changed it. That completely changed my outlook on everything, my personality. I would have not even dreamed about doing a video like this back then. And I guess kind of my purpose for telling that story is just, if you get down there and you are feeling depressed, you're having to go to the parks by yourself, you don't feel like you're fitting in at work, you don't have a friend group, which I'm sure me and Blaze will do a video about solo park days, because they are actually very special and something that often gets overlooked. But yeah, I was pretty much, like I said, on the edge of antisocialness for probably 4 or 5 months of my 7-month program. Or maybe 3 or 4, maybe not quite 5, but it took quite a while for things to really change for me. And even after I kind of changed as a person, I was going to the parks by myself all the time. Slightly by choice. I mean, it was just kind of the way I rolled. More of a lone wolf kind of deal, but not that I'm opposed to going to the parks with other people. That's very special as well. There's a lot of different experiences you get for doing that, as opposed to just going by yourself. But I wasn't really the type of person at that point that people wanted to invite to do that kind of thing. So I think really, like I said, my whole purpose for telling that whole story aspect of it is, if you've been there, if you've been there for a month or two and you, like I said, are just feeling homesick, alone, you're going to the parks by yourself, just keep pushing is what I would say. And I'm not saying that in like a derogatory, like diminutive manner, that you should just keep doing this. Even if you're depressed, just don't worry about that. You can deal with that. It's not that kind of, I'm not that kind of thing. I'm saying it in a more encouraging way, because I really think if you persist for a little longer and you do change as a person, which this company forces you to do that, trust me, you will be very glad when you look at it later on and during the moment that you stayed. There were times on my first program where I had thoughts about leaving. I was highly considering it, because like I said, I don't know if I reached the level of depressed, but I mean, I probably did at some points during that program. Depressed, angry, quick service. If you watched our recent video, if you haven't, go watch that if you want to hear a lot about quick service, but not the easiest job. But yeah, I persisted, I pushed through. I made some very good friends from staying there. And yeah, I think the big lesson would just be, don't give up on it too quick, is what I would say. But if you've been there for a few months and, you're not really seeing any improvement just in the quality of life, you really are missing home, really having bad depression, don't be afraid to leave. And that would really be my big thing for any of these reasons why you could leave, is don't be afraid to do it. As I've said here, it's not as convoluted as it sounds. It's surprisingly easy to do it. And I'm certainly not saying you should just leave. I'm not encouraging people to leave, even though I'm saying it's not that easy, and you shouldn't be afraid to do. I'm certainly not saying, oh, if you don't like your job, leave. As I've said earlier, I think that's ridiculous most of the time. But, yeah. Definitely try to persist. But if it does reach that point where you just can't do it anymore, it's just an internship. I mean, not really, because me and Blaze talk very highly of it. It isn't just an internship when it comes to the whole aspect of it. But when it comes to your personal health, personal quality of life, that sort of thing, it is just an internship. It's just working for Disney. It is not something that should rule your life and force you to make every decision based around it. And especially with family emergencies, life events, major life events, that kind of thing, don't be afraid to leave. You can come back, as I've repeated many times in this, and I think that's the big thing, is that you can come back and you won't be spending thousands of dollars on housing in the meantime before you come back. Yeah, and I think that's a big thing. Like I said, they always have that saying, Disney will always be there. And that cliche is kind of true. I mean, it's not a guarantee that you will get into the program, again, if you self-term. But Disney will always be there. The opportunity is there, whether that be the program or as a full-time, part-time cast member. And for me, I had already completed a program before self-terming. I don't know if that had an effect on them hiring me again after self-terming for the alumni program. I'm sure it probably had some effect, just because I did have 10 months of experience in the company in multiple roles. Well, not multiple roles, multiple locations, a couple of roles. But yeah, I think it's not the end of the world if you self-term. You can come back. I think that's pretty much all I have. I'm sure it's not the longest video we've had on here, but I mean, it's pretty much just, like I said, I wanted to do less of the why and more of the what, how, when, where. Like, I want people to know how to do this, what goes down, what the ramifications are, and I hope that this has taught you that in one way or another. And yeah, make the most of your program. If you're going through stuff, if you're really not enjoying your role, tell me in the comments. Let me know what's going on. I'll give my best suggestions for finding that Disney magic. And I know Blaze said this a while back, but give us your suggestions on videos to do. We definitely have some stuff coming down the pipeline, but we like to hear from people as well on what you think we should do. Anything Disney related, doesn't have to just be the college program. We want to branch out. But yeah, other than that, I guess I'll see you next time. It might just be me. Blaze might be back by then. But yeah, see you next time.